In the darkest corner of the galaxy, far from the light of civilization, there was a space station that did not appear on any official map. It was called the Black Market by those who knew of its existence, a place where criminals and killers conducted their business away from the eyes of the Lawzeth. Raul sat alone in his private quarters aboard this station, studying the holographic image of a human female that floated above his desk. The image showed Claire Morgan walking through the corridors of Nexus Prime, unaware that she was being watched. Her file contained everything about her: her age, her position, her daily schedule, her security arrangements. He was a Shivari, a species that resembled humanoids covered in smooth gray scales with large yellow eyes that could see in complete darkness. The Shivari were known throughout the galaxy for one unique ability: the power to teleport short distances in the blink of an eye. This ability made them perfect assassins, and Zethril was the best of them all for 500 years. He had served as a contract killer, taking jobs from the wealthy and powerful who needed problems to disappear. In all that time, he had never failed a single contract. His method was simple and legendary. He would study his target, learn their patterns, find the perfect moment, and then teleport directly behind them. By the time they realized he was there, it was already too late. The galaxy knew him as the Phantom, a name that struck fear into the hearts of anyone who heard it. There was no hiding from him, no defense against his sudden appearance, no time to react before his blade found its mark. His communication device chimed, and he answered it with a touch. The face of a Valorian appeared on the screen, a nervous-looking creature who identified himself as a representative of the Syndicate. The Phantom? The Valorian asked uncertainly. "Speak." Zethril replied in a voice as cold as the void between stars. "We wish to hire your services for a contract. The target is a human diplomat named Claire Morgan, currently stationed on Nexus Prime. She must be eliminated before she can present a trade proposal to the Galactic Assembly." Zethril studied the file again. "A human," he said slowly. "You are offering me a great deal of money to kill such a small and weak creature. Why is she worth so much?" "She threatens powerful interests," the Valorian replied. "The Syndicate requires absolute certainty that she will be stopped. We are willing to pay triple your normal rate." Zethril considered this for a moment. Triple rate for killing a human seemed excessive, almost insulting. Humans were considered one of the weaker species in the galaxy, with no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. They died easily and could not fight back against a trained assassin. But money was money, and Zethril had not survived 500 years by asking too many questions. "I accept the contract," he said. "The human will be dead within 1 week." He ended the communication and began preparing for his journey to Nexus Prime during the long trip through hyperspace. Zethril reviewed everything he could find about humans. They were a young species from a planet called Earth, a world classified as a Class 7 death world due to its extreme conditions. Their homeworld had dangerous predators, unpredictable weather, and countless ways to kill its inhabitants. Interesting, Zethril thought, but not relevant. Deathworld origins might make humans slightly tougher than average, but it would not save them from a blade in the dark. They had no way to detect his teleportation, no reflexes fast enough to counter his attack, no defense against an enemy who could appear from nowhere. He arrived at Nexus Prime 2 days later, using false identification documents that marked him as a merchant from a neutral system. The station's security scanners could not detect his teleportation ability because it left no technological signature. To them, he was just another traveler conducting business for the next 2 days. Zethril watched Claire Morgan from a distance. He observed her morning routine, her meetings with other diplomats, her lunch in the public dining hall, her evening walks along the observation deck. She was a creature of habit, predictable, and unprotected. He noticed that she seemed distracted sometimes, looking over her shoulder as if expecting to see something. He wondered if she sensed that something was wrong, but he dismissed the thought. Humans did not have danger senses. They had nothing but their fragile bodies and their primitive instincts. What Zethral did not know, what no one had told him, was that human instincts were anything but primitive. On his second night of surveillance, Zethral selected his moment. Claire Morgan would return to her quarters alone after a late meeting with other diplomats. A security detail would remain outside her door, leaving her unprotected inside. He would teleport into her quarters, kill her quickly and quietly, and teleport away before anyone knew he had been there. The plan was perfect. It had worked hundreds of times before on targets far more dangerous than a human diplomat. Meanwhile, Claire sat in her meeting with growing unease. The feeling of danger had become almost overwhelming, like a storm building on the horizon. She could barely concentrate on the discussion about trade regulations because her instincts were screaming at her that death was close. Senior Ambassador Daniel Price noticed her distraction and gave her a concerned look across the table. She shook her head slightly, signaling that she would explain later after the meeting ended. Claire walked slowly back to her quarters. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every stranger seemed suspicious. She had never felt her danger sense this strongly before, not even during the border conflicts 3 years ago, when she had nearly been killed in a shuttle accident. Something was very wrong. And it was getting closer. She entered her quarters and stood in the darkness for a long moment, listening to the silence. Then she walked to her desk and sat down, picking up a datapad as if to read. But her eyes were not on the screen. They were watching the reflections in the dark window, searching for any sign of movement. In her other hand, hidden beneath the desk, she held a knife. She had carried this knife since her first day on Nexus Prime, a gift from her father, who had served in Earth's military. He had taught her that the best weapon was the one your enemy did not know you had tonight. She had a feeling she was going to need it in the maintenance corridor outside her quarters. Zethral completed his final preparations. He confirmed her location through thermal scanning, noting that she was alone and seated at her desk. Her back was to the center of the room, the perfect position for his attack. He smiled, a cold expression that showed his sharp teeth. This would be the easiest contract of his career. In a few seconds, Claire Morgan would be dead, and he would be on his way to collect his payment. He gathered his energy, focused on the spot directly behind her chair, and initiated his teleportation. The shift took less than a heartbeat, folding space around him and depositing him exactly where he intended to be. His blade was already moving toward her neck when he realized that something was terribly wrong. She was not in her chair. The galactic capital station, known as Nexus Prime, floated in the darkness between 3 star systems, a massive structure of metal and light that served as the center of all interstellar diplomacy and trade. Hundreds of species walked its corridors every day, conducting business that shaped the future of entire worlds. And among them walked the representatives of humanity, a species that had only joined the galactic community 30 years ago. Claire Morgan stood at the window of her small office, watching ships arrive and depart from the station's many docking bays. She was 32 years old, with short brown hair and steady gray eyes that seemed to notice everything around her. As Earth's junior ambassador to the Galactic Assembly, she had spent the last 3 years learning the complex politics of interstellar relations. And she had become very good at her job. Her desk was covered with datapads containing trade agreements and diplomatic proposals. The current project was her most ambitious yet, a new trade deal that would benefit 12 smaller species who had been exploited by wealthy merchants for decades. These species had no voice in the assembly, no power to protect themselves. And Claire had decided to change that. The door to her office slid open and Senior Ambassador Daniel Price walked in. a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and a kind face. He had been Claire's mentor since she arrived on the station, teaching her the subtle art of alien diplomacy. "You look troubled," Daniel said as he sat down across from her desk. Claire turned from the window and shook her head. "I am not sure troubled is the right word. It is more like a feeling I cannot explain, like something is watching me from the shadows." Daniel frowned at her words. He knew about the gift that many humans possessed, the instinctive awareness of danger that had helped their ancestors survive on Earth. Not all humans had it strongly, but Claire's was particularly sharp. "Has something specific happened?" he asked. "No, nothing specific," Claire replied, sitting down at her desk. "Just a feeling that has been growing stronger over the past few days. I keep looking over my shoulder, expecting to see something that is not there. Perhaps it is just stress from the negotiations," Daniel suggested. "You have made some powerful enemies with this trade deal. The Valorian Syndicate stands to lose billions if your proposal passes." Claire nodded slowly. The Valorian Syndicate was a coalition of the wealthiest merchant species in the galaxy, and they had built their fortune by controlling trade routes and exploiting smaller civilizations. Her trade deal would break their monopoly and give smaller species the freedom to trade directly with each other. "I know they are not happy with me," Claire said, "but this feeling is different from political pressure. It feels more personal, more immediate." Daniel leaned forward with concern on his face. "Do you want me to request additional security for you?" Claire considered the offer for a moment before shaking her head. "No, not yet. I do not want to appear paranoid or weak in front of the assembly. Besides, what would I tell security? That I have a bad feeling?" Daniel smiled slightly. "Among humans, that would be reason enough. But you were right that aliens might not understand. Most species in the galaxy did not know about humanity's evolved threat sense. It was not something humans talked about openly because it made other species uncomfortable. The idea that humans could sense danger before it arrived seemed like superstition to races who relied purely on technology and logic after Daniel left." Claire tried to focus on her work, but the uneasy feeling would not go away. She reviewed the trade agreement one more time, checking every detail to make sure there were no mistakes. The vote was scheduled for next week, and she needed everything to be perfect. Meanwhile, on the other side of the station, a very different meeting was taking place. Executor Draven of the Valorian Syndicate sat in a private chamber, surrounded by screens that displayed financial reports and market projections. He was a Valorian himself, a species that resembled tall humanoids with blue-gray skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces. His species had built their empire through clever trading and ruthless elimination of competition. The numbers on his screens told a disturbing story. If Claire Morgan's trade deal passed, the Syndicate would lose control of 12 profitable trade routes. Smaller species would gain independence, and the Syndicate's influence would begin to shrink. This was unacceptable. "We have tried everything legal to stop her," said his assistant, a nervous Valorian named Keth. "We offered bribes that she refused. We threatened economic sanctions against Earth, but the humans did not care. We even tried to discredit her in the assembly, but she has too many supporters." Draven's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the image of Claire Morgan on one of his screens. Such a small creature, he thought, such a fragile species. And yet she was causing him more trouble than enemies 10 times her size. "Then we must try something illegal," Draven said coldly. Keth's eyes widened. "Sir, if we are caught taking action against a diplomatic representative, the consequences would be severe." "We will not be caught," Draven replied. "Contact our associates in the shadow market. Tell them I wish to hire the Phantom." Keth took a step backward in shock. The Phantom was a legend in the criminal underworld, an assassin who had never failed a contract in 500 years. His services were extraordinarily expensive, but his results were guaranteed. "Sir, is that not extreme for one human diplomat?" Keth asked. Nervous Lidrivan stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "She is not just one diplomat. She is a symbol. If her trade deal passes, others will follow her example. They will see that the syndicate can be challenged, that we can be defeated. We must end this threat before it grows." He turned back to his assistant with cold determination in his eyes. "Make the contact. Money is no object. I want Claire Morgan dead before she can bring her proposal to a vote." Keth bowed his head and left to carry out his orders. Back in her quarters that night, Claire could not sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts she could not quiet. The feeling of being watched had grown stronger, like a weight pressing down on her chest. She got up and walked to her window, looking out at the endless field of stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, her home, a world that had taught her species hard lessons about survival. Humans had not become the dominant species on their planet by being the strongest or the fastest. They had survived by being aware, by sensing the predators in the tall grass before they could strike. "Something is coming," Claire whispered to herself. "I can feel it." She did not know who or what was hunting her, but she knew with absolute certainty the danger was approaching. And like her ancestors before her, she would be ready when it arrived. The moment Zethral materialized in Claire Morgan's quarters, he knew that something had gone terribly wrong. His blade cut through empty air where her neck should have been. And before he could understand what was happening, he felt cold metal pressing against his throat. Claire stood facing him, her gray eyes calm and focused, her knife held steady against the soft scales beneath his jaw. She had moved from her chair, turned around, and positioned herself perfectly to meet him in the fraction of a second it took for his teleportation to complete. This was impossible. No one had ever countered his attack before. No one had ever known he was coming until it was too late. "Do not move," Claire said in a quiet voice. "This knife is made of Terran steel, sharp enough to cut through your scales like paper. If you try to teleport away, I will open your throat before you can finish the thought." Zethro froze completely. His yellow eyes were wide with shock and confusion. In 500 years of killing, he had faced warriors and soldiers and bodyguards of every species, and none of them had ever managed to surprise him like this. "How?" he demanded, his voice harsh with disbelief. "How did you know I was coming? There is no technology that can detect Shivari teleportation. There is no warning, no signal, nothing." Claire studied him for a moment before answering. "You are right that there is no technology. But I did not need technology. I felt you coming from the moment you stepped onto this station 3 days ago." Zethral's confusion deepened. "Felt me? That is not possible. Humans have no sensory abilities beyond the standard 5 senses. That is what everyone believes," Claire said. "That is what we let everyone believe. But you are wrong. Humans evolved on a death world, a planet filled with predators that could kill us in 100 different ways. We survived not because we were strong or fast, but because we learned to sense when death was approaching." She kept her knife steady as she continued speaking. "Every human carries this instinct inside them. Most never need to use it because our modern world is safe. But the ability never goes away. When danger approaches, we feel it like a pressure in our chest, like eyes watching from the darkness, like a whisper telling us to be ready." Zethral listened to her words with growing amazement. He had studied humans extensively before this contract, and nothing in their files mentioned anything like this. They were supposed to be weak, fragile, easy prey. "I have been sensing you for 3 days," Claire continued. "I did not know exactly what was hunting me, but I knew something was coming. And tonight, when you positioned yourself in that maintenance corridor, I felt your intention like a blade against my own skin. I knew exactly when you would strike and exactly where you would appear. Impossible, Zethral whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. The evidence was right in front of him, a human woman who had done what no one else in the galaxy had ever accomplished. She had been waiting for the phantom. Evolution is a powerful thing, Claire said. Your species developed the ability to teleport because it helped you survive. My species developed the ability to sense predators for the same reason. You are not the first hunter to underestimate us, and you will not be the last. She pressed the knife slightly harder against his throat, not enough to draw blood, but enough to remind him of his position. Now, we need to talk about why you are here and who sent you. Zethral remained silent. Assassins did not reveal their clients. It was the first rule of his profession. Claire seemed to understand his hesitation. I already know it was the Valorian Syndicate, she said. They are the only ones with enough money to hire someone like you and enough motivation to want me dead. I just need you to confirm it. And if I do not confirm? Zethral asked. Then I will be forced to report this assassination attempt to station security, and you will spend the rest of your very long life in a prison cell. The Galactic Assembly takes attacks on diplomatic personnel very seriously. Zethral considered his options carefully. Prison was not something he feared exactly, but it would mean the end of everything he had built over 5 centuries. His reputation, his freedom, his identity as the Phantom would all be destroyed. Why have you not killed me already? He asked. Most people in your position would have struck first and asked questions later. Claire's expression softened slightly. Because killing you does not solve my problem. The Syndicate will simply hire someone else, and I will have to go through this again. Besides, I do not enjoy killing, not even killing someone who came to murder me. This answer surprised Zethral more than anything else that had happened tonight. He had killed hundreds of targets in his career, and he had never once hesitated or felt guilt. The idea that someone could hold the power of life and death and choose not to use it was foreign to him. What do you want from me? He asked. Claire lowered her knife slightly, though she remained ready to strike if he made any sudden moves. I want to understand you. I want to know why someone with your abilities chose to become an assassin instead of something else. And I want to offer you something that no one has ever offered you before. And what is that? A choice, Claire said simply. A chance to be something other than a weapon that the powerful use against the weak. A chance to help your own people instead of serving the ones who once enslaved them. Zethral felt something shift inside him at those words. She knew about the Shivari's history, about the centuries they had spent as slaves to the Syndicate and other wealthy factions. She knew, and she was not using it to mock him or manipulate him. She was using it to offer him something he had never considered possible. You know nothing about me, he said. But his voice had lost its edge. I know that the Shivari were enslaved by the Syndicate 2,000 years ago, Claire replied. I know that your people bought their freedom by agreeing to serve as assassins and enforcers for their former masters. I know that every contract you complete makes your species more valuable to them and less likely to ever truly be free. She met his yellow eyes with her steady gray ones. I know that you have spent 500 years killing for the same people who once owned your ancestors. Does that not make you angry? Zethral did not answer. But his silence was answer enough. I am going to lower my knife now, Claire said. Not because I trust you, but because I want you to understand that I am not your enemy. The Syndicate is your enemy. They have always been your enemy. They just made you forget that by giving you money and purpose. She stepped back and placed her knife on the desk, leaving herself apparently defenseless. It was a gesture of trust that no target had ever shown him before. Now, she said, shall we talk about how to make things right? Zethral stood in the middle of Claire Morgan's quarters, feeling more uncertain than he had felt in 500 years. His blade hung at his side, unused and useless. The human who should have been his victim was now offering him tea and talking about revolution. I do not understand you, he said finally. I came here to kill you. Any rational being would want me dead in return. Claire handed him a cup of warm liquid and sat down across from him. Killing you would be the easy choice, she admitted. But easy choices are rarely the right ones. Besides, I learned a long time ago that enemies can become allies if you give them a reason. She took a sip of her own tea before continuing. Let me tell you what I am proposing. Want to bring formal charges against the Valorian Syndicate before the Galactic Assembly. I have evidence of their corrupt business practices, but I need more. I need testimony from someone inside their network. Someone who knows their secrets. You want me to betray my clients? Zethrol said flatly. I want you to expose criminals who have been exploiting vulnerable species for thousands of years. Claire corrected. The Syndicate is not just bad for business. They are responsible for slave trafficking, assassination of political opponents, bribery of assembly officials, and economic warfare against anyone who threatens their profits. She leaned forward with intensity in her eyes. They hired you to kill me because I am trying to help 12 species who have been trapped in unfair trade agreements. These species have no power, no voice, no way to fight back. The Syndicate bleeds them dry and calls it commerce. Zethrol listened without expression, but his mind was racing. He had always known that his clients were not good people, but he had never allowed himself to think about the larger picture. He was a tool, a weapon. Weapons did not ask questions about the hands that wielded them. Even if I wanted to help you, he said slowly, the Syndicate would retaliate. They would send more assassins, not just for you, but for me and my entire species. The Shivari would pay the price for my betrayal. Not if we do this correctly, Claire replied. Earth has influence in the Assembly, more than most people realize. If you help me expose the Syndicate, humanity will support the Shivari in a petition for full independence from all Syndicate contracts. Zethrol's yellow eyes widened. Full independence? That has never been granted to any species in Syndicate territory, because no one has ever had enough evidence to force the Assembly to act, Claire said. But you have that evidence. You have 500 years of contracts, payments, communications, everything needed to prove what the Syndicate really is. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. I am not asking you to do this for me. I am asking you to do this for your people. For 500 years, the Shivari have served their former masters, killing on command, never questioning, never hoping for anything better. Do you not think they deserve freedom? The question hit Zethrol harder than any weapon could have. He had spent centuries telling himself that his work was necessary, that the Shivari had no other options, that survival required compromise. But hearing this human speak about his people's future made those excuses feel hollow. Why do you care about the Shivari? He asked. We have no alliance with Earth, no trade agreements, nothing to offer you. Claire turned back to face him. Because humans believe that freedom is not something you earn through service. It is something every intelligent being deserves simply by existing. We spent centuries fighting each other over this idea, and we nearly destroyed our world before we finally understood it. I do not want other species to make the same mistakes. She walked back to stand in front of him. And because I see something in you that you may not see in yourself. You could have tried to fight me when I lowered my knife, but you did not. You could have teleported away the moment you had a chance, but you stayed. Some part of you wants to hear what I have to say, wants to believe that there is another way. Zethrol was silent for a long moment. Everything she said was true, and that truth was painful. He had spent 500 years building an identity as the Phantom, the perfect assassin, the weapon that never failed. If he gave that up, what would be left? I do not know how to be anything other than what I am, he admitted. Killing is all I have ever done. Then learn something new, Claire said simply. It will not be easy, and it will not happen overnight, but you can change. Everyone can change. That is what makes us more than just our pasts. Zethral looked at her with something like wonder. This human was not afraid of him, not angry at him, not trying to use him. She was simply offering him a choice. The first real choice he'd been given since the syndicate recruited him centuries ago. "If I do this," he said carefully, "if I help you expose the syndicate and testify before the assembly, what happens to me afterward?" "That depends on you," Claire replied. "You could return to the Shivari homeworld and help your people build a new future. You could stay here and work as a consultant on security matters. Or you could do something completely different. The point is that the choice would be yours." She extended her hand toward him, a human gesture of agreement that he had seen but never experienced. "What do you say? Will you help me bring down the syndicate and free your people?" Zethral stared at her hand for what felt like an eternity. His entire life had been built on contracts and obligations, on serving those with power and money. The idea of choosing his own path was almost frightening, but it was also exciting in a way he had not felt since he was young. Before the syndicate had turned him into a weapon, he reached out and took her hand. "I will help you," he said. "Not because I trust you completely, not because I believe it will work, but because you are right. My people deserve better than serving the ones who enslaved them." Claire smiled, and Zethral was surprised to feel something warm in his chest at the sight. "Then we have work to do," she said. "The vote on my trade proposal is in 5 days. We need to compile your evidence and prepare our case before then." "The syndicate will not wait 5 days," Zethral warned. "When they learn that I failed to kill you, they will send others. There are assassins throughout the galaxy who would take this contract. Then we will have to be ready for them," Claire said without fear. "You know their methods better than anyone. Help me prepare, and together we will show them why humans should never be underestimated." Zethral felt something shift inside him as he looked at this remarkable human. For the first time in 500 years, he was not thinking about his next contract or his next payment. He was thinking about the future, about possibility, about hope. "You are very strange," he said. Claire laughed softly. "I know, humans usually are. But we are also very loyal to those who stand with us. You will not regret this choice." As they began to plan their next moves, Zethral realized that he already did not regret it. For the first time in centuries, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The days that followed were the most dangerous of Claire Morgan's life, but she faced them without fear. With Zethral at her side, she began compiling centuries of evidence against the Valorian syndicate, documenting crimes that had been hidden for thousands of years. Word of Zethral's failure reached Executor Draven within hours, and his response was immediate and furious. He hired 3 more assassins from different species, each with their own deadly methods, and sent them all to Nexus Prime with orders to kill both Claire and the traitor who had betrayed him. The first assassin was a Krethian, a species known for their ability to disguise themselves as any humanoid. He infiltrated the diplomatic section by taking the form of a maintenance worker and waited in the shadows near Claire's office. But when he raised his weapon to strike, Claire was already looking directly at him. "I know you are not who you appear to be," she said calmly. "I could feel your killing intent from the moment you entered this corridor." The Krethian tried to attack anyway, but Zethral appeared behind him in a flash of teleportation and disarmed him before he could fire. The assassin was taken into custody by station security, and his testimony added another layer of evidence against the syndicate. The second assassin was more creative. She was a Velthan, a species that could project illusions directly into the minds of other beings. She planned to make Claire believe she was walking into a meeting while actually walking into an ambush, but human minds proved resistant to her illusions. Claire felt the wrongness immediately. a sense that what she was seeing did not match what her instincts were telling her. She stopped walking, closed her eyes, and focused on what her danger sense was actually detecting. "There are 4 armed individuals waiting around the corner," she said aloud, "and 1 Velthan standing 3 meters to my right." Maintaining the illusion, the Velthan fled the station that night and was never seen again. The 3rd assassin never got close enough to try anything. He was a mercenary from the outer systems, a professional killer with decades of experience. But when he arrived at Nexus Prime and learned that 2 other assassins had already failed, he decided that the contract was not worth his life. He visited Claire's quarters instead and asked to speak with her. When she opened the door, already knowing why he had come, he simply asked her one question. "How are you doing this?" He demanded. "How does a human know we are coming before we strike?" Claire invited him inside and explained what she had explained to Zethral. She told him about human evolution, about the danger sense that had kept her ancestors alive on Earth, about the instinct that every human carried in their blood. The mercenary listened with disbelief that slowly turned to understanding. "So you are saying that humans can sense when someone intends to kill them?" "Not perfectly," Claire admitted. "It is not like reading minds. It is more like feeling a change in the air before a storm arrives. We know something dangerous is approaching, and we prepare for it." The mercenary shook his head slowly. "The Syndicate should have told us this. They sent us to kill someone they knew we could not surprise. They wasted our lives to try to stop you. That is what the Syndicate does," Claire replied. "They use people like tools and throw them away when they break. You can leave this station right now, and I will not stop you. Or you can stay and add your testimony to the case against them." The mercenary chose to leave, but before he went, he gave Claire a piece of advice. "Be careful at the assembly vote. Draven will not give up. If he cannot kill you, he will try something else." Claire thanked him and returned to her preparations. The day of the vote arrived with tension hanging over the entire station. The assembly chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of species, all waiting to hear the arguments for and against Claire's trade proposal. But Claire had something much bigger planned when it was her turn to speak. She did not talk about trade agreements or economic policy. Instead, she presented the evidence that Zethral had gathered over 500 years. The contracts and communications and financial records that proved the Syndicate's crimes. The assembly listened in shocked silence as Claire detailed assassination orders, bribery schemes, slave trafficking operations, and economic warfare against innocent species. She showed them how the Syndicate had maintained power through fear and violence, and how they had tried to kill her simply for trying to help. The weak Zithral stood beside her and added his own testimony, confirming every accusation with personal knowledge. He spoke about his centuries as an assassin and about the other Shivari who had been forced into similar service. He spoke about a species that had never truly been free. Despite what the official records claimed, Executor Draven tried to interrupt several times, claiming that the evidence was fabricated and that Zethral was a liar seeking revenge. But the assembly had seen enough. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The vote was decisive. The Syndicate was sanctioned and ordered to submit to a full investigation of their operations. 12 species were immediately freed from their unfair trade agreements. And most importantly, the Assembly voted to grant the Shivari complete independence from all existing Syndicate contracts for the first time in 2,000 years. The Shivari were truly free. That evening, Zethral found Claire on the observation deck, watching the stars as ships departed from the station. He approached her slowly, still not entirely comfortable with casual conversation after centuries of solitary work. "Your people have done something remarkable today," he said. "The Shivari will remember this for generations." Claire smiled without turning from the window. "It was not just my people. It was you." Without your courage to stand up and testify, none of this would have been possible. I almost killed you, Zethril reminded her. 3 days ago, I was the weapon the Syndicate aimed at your heart. Why did you trust me? Claire finally turned to face him. Because I could see that you were more than a weapon. The Syndicate tried to turn you into a tool, but they failed. Somewhere inside, you remembered what it meant to hope for something better. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm, a gesture that no longer felt strange to him. That is what humans understand better than most species. We were monsters once, killing each other over territory and resources and ideas. But we learned to be better. We learned that everyone deserves a second chance. Zethril was silent for a long moment, processing everything that had happened. What will you do now? He asked. The Syndicate has been weakened, but they are not destroyed. They will seek revenge. Let them try, Claire said with quiet confidence. They have learned now that humans cannot be ambushed, cannot be surprised, cannot be easily killed. More importantly, they have learned that we make friends wherever we go. And our friends are loyal. She looked at him with warmth in her gray eyes. Speaking of which, Earth's diplomatic mission could use a security consultant. Someone who understands how assassins think and how to defend against them. Would you be interested? Zethril felt something he had not felt in 500 years, a sense of belonging to something larger than himself. I would be honored, he said as they walked back into the station together. Claire heard Zethril make a sound she had never heard from him before. He was laughing. What is funny? She asked. I was just thinking, he replied. The Syndicate sent the galaxy's greatest assassin to kill one human diplomat. And now that assassin is going to spend the rest of his life protecting humans instead. The universe has a strange sense of humor. Claire laughed with him. Welcome to humanity, she said. Strange is what we do best, and across the galaxy, in shadows and secret places, other predators heard the whispers of what had happened on Nexus Prime. They heard about the human who sensed danger before it arrived, who turned enemies into allies with a few words and a choice. They heard about the Phantom who had become a protector, and they added a new rule to their ancient codes. Never hunt the humans. They will know you are coming. And worse, they might try to save you,